Hello everyone, so today I'll be discussing about calcium hydroxide. These are the headings under which I'll be talking about the calcium hydroxide in neurotics particularly. So in neurotics, calcium hydroxide can be used in two ways. The first is as intracanal medicament and second is as root canal sealer. So first I'll be talking about intracanal medicament. Its use as an intracanal medicament. So first of all, what is intracanal medicament? That is an antimicrobial agent which is placed inside the root canal between treatment appointments in an attempt to destroy remaining microorganisms and prevent reinfection. So what are the clinical applications of calcium hydroxide? First and foremost is hard tissue formation. Use of calcium hydroxide for the purpose of hard tissue formation in immature teeth with pulp necrosis. So wherever there are immature teeth and the pulp has already been necrosed, in those cases we can use calcium hydroxide to induce the apical barrier formation by initiating the necrosis in the apical region. The first there will be liquefying necrosis formation and then the coagulative necrosis. The four zones of calcium hydroxide, what we can see in the when we use apical calcium hydroxide for as a pulp capping agent, the same zones we can observe in the cases where we use calcium hydroxide as an intracanal medicament in the immature tooth with pulp necrosis particularly. So this is how we can induce the hard tissue formation in such cases. So the only drawback is, the main thing is, like when we use calcium hydroxide to induce hard tissue formation, we have to use it for about 60 to 90 days. So when we use calcium hydroxide for such a long period of time, it can cause weakening effect on the dentinal strength and it can lead to cervical root fracture. So according to Stromer et al., like 60% of endodontically treated teeth with immature root formation have had cervical fracture due to minor impact. So the next use of calcium hydroxide is hard tissue formation in root fracture with coronal pulp necrosis. So here in such cases also we have to use it for longer period of time, calcium hydroxide. So it can again cause the fracture of root in those cases. So that is the only drawback. Otherwise calcium hydroxide is really good in formation of the hard tissue. Then the next use is in external surface related root resorption. So it can arrest 98% of the infection related resorption and 90 in luxated teeth and 90% in Ever's teeth. The only drawback here is also the same. It has a weakening effect on dentinal strength and can lead to cervical root fracture. So when we compare calcium hydroxide with the MTA can also be used for apical barrier formation instead of calcium hydroxide. The advantages of MTA over calcium hydroxide are, the first one is we do not have to recall patient again and again. In single sitting also we can put MTA, and MTA can induce apical barrier formation. And second thing is the quality of barrier which is formed due to MTA is far better than calcium hydroxide. It does not have channels through which can communicate through the canal through the apical barrier from canal to the apical periapical region. The third number is the MTA can modulate cytokine production and these cytokines can encourage differentiation of hard tissue producing cells way more faster than calcium hydroxide, and particularly these all things are possible just only because of the presence of silicates in MTA. Now next is mechanism of action. So these are the four mechanism of action of calcium hydroxide per se. Now the first one is antimicrobial. So it has antimicrobial effect against E. faecalis when we see both type of paste, the aqueous also and silicone oil based. But according to Potnier et al., it is more sensitive, like E. faecalis are more sensitive to calcium hydroxide when they are particularly in exponential growth phase, and they are more resistant when they are in stationary phase, and they are most resistant when they are in starvation phase. Now what are these phases? So this one is the bacterial growth curve.
So first they'll just collect all the nutrients which are responsible for its cell division. During this phase, there will be no increase in size because they are not dividing. Sorry, there will be no increase in number of bacteria because they are not dividing, but there will be increase in size. So during leg phase, there is a stationary phase. After that, it will start dividing. It will start multiplying. So here you can see that this is the, then comes the exponential phase, that is the log phase. So you can see that drastic increase in the number of bacteria, and then again there will be a stationary phase. So during exponential phase, the antimicrobial agent and the medicament like calcium hydroxide can kill the bacteria very effectively. Why? The first reason, because during this time the main important component of bacteria which work hard for the division, they are the cell wall, because we know that cell wall play an important role in cell division, and second is the DNA, right? And we know that calcium hydroxide can can directly affect the cell wall of the bacteria by protein denaturation and it can also affect the lipid component, and also it can directly damage the DNA. So during this phase, they are in very critical conditions, so we can kill the bacteria if they are dividing. Then comes the stationary phase. Here there will be depletion of the nutrient, so the number of dividing cells and number of dying cells, they both are same. Okay, so there will be no increase in overall number of bacteria. But here now bacteria know that there will be depletion of the nutrition even in next conditions also. So what they do, they'll try to protect themselves. If they are spore forming bacteria, they'll form a spore, and if they are they are the bacteria which can produce the toxins like endotoxin, so then they'll produce endotoxin, and that is how they can protect themselves from the harsh environment. So here if you use medicament, they have their own protection, so you cannot kill those bacteria because they have a protection against all these substances. Whereas in exponential phase, they are busy in dividing, while in stationary phase they have certain protection, that's why it is resistant. And in death phase, during death phase, that is the starvation phase, during this phase the situation becomes more critical, so they'll have more amount of protection, and again there will be more number of dying bacteria. Even in the Mrinalini's seminar, she also explained that when the bacteria when the bacteria dies, they releases certain amount of substances which will be helpful for the viable bacteria. So they'll make sure that if they are dying, they'll help the other bacteria by releasing at least nutrient and maybe the resistant product also. So whatever bacteria are viable, they become more resistant to the substances. So here you can see that during starvation phase it becomes most resistant, and it is most sensitive when it is in exponential growth phase. I hope it is clear to everyone. Okay, now the second property, the first was the growth phase. Second, that E. faecalis can bind to collagen fiber. Okay, see, just forget about it. This is one study. Here you can see this study. This article is very important. If you have time, please go through it. This is the link. Okay, please go through it and read about it. In this article, they check the two property of E. faecalis. First, whether it can bind to collagen fiber in certain condition, like when they increase the temperature and they increase the pH. Like what are the effect of increased temperature and increased pH on the growth of E. faecalis? Okay. So first thing, here you can see this is a 37 degree, this is 46 degree. So here you can see the number of cells were increased during the higher temperature, and there was the adhesion between the E. faecalis and collagen. So E. faecalis can adhere to collagen initial phases only, and after once the temperature increases, that time E. faecalis can grow more. Then second phase, in that they check the effect of pH. Here you can see that with increasing pH, there is a increasing growth of the E. faecalis also, and it is the most the most favorable pH for the E. faecalis to grow is 8.5. Even it can survive around 9 to 11 pH also, but after 11.9 pH it cannot survive. So if your calcium hydroxide dressing can produce the pH around 12.5, that is more than 12, then E. faecalis cannot survive that that phase, that environment. But if your calcium hydroxide is creating environment, creating pH of around 8 to 11, then there will be more favorable environment for E. faecalis to grow more. Okay. Then here, actually, my question is that if you, they are saying that it can adhere to collagen fiber, right? So if you are using EDTA to remove smear layer before placing calcium hydroxide dressing, that means you are exposing fresh collagen to the environment for the E. faecalis. Like literally, we are providing a bed for them that come and place here, and you can grow now, because anyway we are going to place calcium hydroxide. We'll give you proper environment, proper pH also to grow more. So the question here is, should we use EDTA before placing calcium hydroxide, or should we use just hypochlorite? Actually, I don't know the answer. I'm just asking because I don't know. The next is, now we'll see that these are the studies which support the finding that calcium hydroxide do not have any antibacterial effect against E. faecalis. Apart from E. faecalis, these are the bacteria which are also resistant to calcium hydroxide. Now the next is the time required to act as an antimicrobial agent. Okay, so till now there is a controversy. Even we have also discussed this a lot of time, that should we place it for 15 days, 10 days. Few people say that, like our senior, even our batchmate also, we don't know. So I went through the literature, and if you want your calcium hydroxide to be act as an antimicrobial agent, you need to place it minimum for 7 to 10 days. Here you can see 7 days to 10 days. And these two authors you need to remember, Jogren and Hapesallo. We know these names. You just have to remember that Jogren and Hapesallo told that you can use calcium, no, you have to use calcium hydroxide for 7 to 10 days to act as an antimicrobial agent. Okay. Then next is, till what depth of dentinal tubule it can penetrate. According to Lean et al. In 2005, they found out that it can be effective up to depth of 200 to 500 micrometer of the dentinal tubule. One more study is there, according to Zhang V et al. Here you can see that they use normal conventional calcium hydroxide and nanoparticle calcium hydroxide. First, you see the result that with nanoparticle calcium hydroxide, there is more amount of penetration into the dentinal tubule, right? Now, what is the difference between conventional calcium hydroxide and nanoparticle calcium hydroxide? According to Komabayashi, when you increase the size of the calcium hydroxide particle, there is a change in shape also. Say for example, if you compare the conventional calcium hydroxide and nanoparticle, in the conventional calcium hydroxide, there will be bigger particle, right? So the shape will be square, like rectangular type. Not square, sorry, rectangular. But if you decrease the size of calcium hydroxide, it becomes calcium hydroxide particle, it becomes round in shape. So here you can see the SEM images of the same study. These first two are the nanoparticle calcium hydroxide, the round shape you can see, and you can see the penetration of in the dentinal tubule also. And here you can see these two images are the conventional calcium hydroxide. You can see here the blockage of the dentinal tubule with the rectangular form of calcium hydroxide. Okay, so one more thing is that about the nanoparticle calcium hydroxide. Now the next is anti-endotoxin activity of calcium hydroxide. Before we talk about the anti-endotoxin activity, we need to know that what is endotoxin. I personally get so confused between the exotoxin and endotoxin. Exotoxin is released by the gram-positive bacteria. They are present inside the cell. Upon lysis, it will release outside the environment. That is what is known as exotoxin. Whereas endotoxin is the part of cell membrane. It also can release upon during the cell division and upon cell lysis. Okay. Now, how will you remember endotoxin and gram-negative NN? Okay. So gram-negative bacteria has endotoxin and gram-positive bacteria has exotoxin. Now, if you see, because as we have studied that it is the part of cell membrane, here you can see the cell membrane, the negative bacteria has a cell membrane of lipopolysaccharide, and at the as the last component it has the lipid A. So lipid A is the part of endotoxin which is the most toxic, and it is the responsible for toxicity. And if you see the toxicity of endotoxin, endotoxin is not toxic actually per se, but it is directly it directly affect our cells like the macrophages, then lymphocytes and neutrophils and all, to create the inflammatory environment, and that is how it can dissolve the bone tissue in that area. So if you go through the literature, there are studies which support that in the cases with the periapical lesion, periapical radiolucency, they found more amount of endotoxin present. Okay, so they found a correlation between the presence of endotoxin and the periapical bone resorption. So it will create and such an environment that the resorption happens. It does not create resorption by its own self. So now we'll see about the effect of calcium hydroxide on endotoxin. Okay, so there are in vitro studies certain in that they found out that calcium hydroxide can hydrolyze the lipid A molecule, which is the most toxic in the endotoxin. And upon hydrolysis, it releases the fatty acid and amino sugar, and these both components are now non-toxic products. So now these components cannot cannot induce the body cells to create the environment of inflammation. And there are certain in vivo studies also in that they found that after placing calcium hydroxide in cases of periapical pathology, there was at least decrease in, there was not, they didn't notice after that the increase in size of lesion. So that means there was a decreased inflammatory reaction in those cases, and after some time upon follow up, they found out that there was decrease in lesion size also radiographically, because radiographically it takes time to show, right? Then here the question comes that should we use calcium hydroxide only in cases which has the periapical radiolucency, because there is a correlation between presence of endotoxin and the periapical radiolucency. That means if it is radiographically evident, then only we should use calcium hydroxide. But according to one study, Wu et al., they actually did one study and they found out that in one case there was like nothing at periapical lesion periapical area. It was completely healthy in one case, and later they found out that there was a 8 big lesion. Okay, but radiographically it was like completely healthy. So how will we know that it is now we should use calcium hydroxide or not? That you can know unless or until you are using CBCT in all the cases, which is not possible, right? So if you consider this property, you should use calcium hydroxide in all the cases. That means you should never do a single sitting endodontics. I'm just telling controversy, okay? I'm not stating anything. So according to Sezer and Bender, that it is accepted that absence of a radiolucency does not guarantee the absence of a bony lesion. So we cannot rely on radiographs. Now the next is antifungal activity. So if you see calcium hydroxide alone, if you see the different strains of Candida, we know that Candida is not normally present in primary endodontic lesion, right? If there are retreatment cases, there is a secondary infection, then only Candida albicans, the Candida strains are present. So, but if you use calcium hydroxide during that, it does not have effect on this fungal strain. But because of two reasons. The first is Candida albicans can survive a wide range of pH value. And the second thing, that whatever calcium hydroxide paste we are using, it can provide Ca+2 ion, the calcium ions, which are necessary for the growth and morphogenesis of Candida. So again, we are providing the favorable environment for the Candida species. Now, one study was done in that they combined the calcium hydroxide with CPMC, that is the paramonochlorophenol, and glycerin and chlorhexidine differently, and they found out that it has the more pronounced effect against the fungi. But if calcium hydroxide alone does not have any antifungal effect, if you see, and if you are adding certain contents to make it more effective, that means the other content is working, right? Not calcium hydroxide. So I'll just conclude by saying this sentence that calcium hydroxide does not have any antifungal effect. If you are adding something to make it more effective against fungi, then it is fine. But if you are using pure calcium hydroxide, it does not have. Okay. Then the activity against biofilm, we know even if we complete, if we are done with the endodontic treatment also, there will be presence of biofilm in the isthmi area and in the accessory canals also. So management of biofilm is the most difficult part of endodontic treatment. In the activity against biofilm of calcium hydroxide is also controversial. Few are saying that it is like effective, and few are saying that it does not remove the biofilm, particularly which has the epicalis. Okay, so there is a controversy regarding biofilm. The next is tissue dissolution capacity. How does it dissolve tissue? That we have discussed already. So the use of calcium hydroxide in tissue dissolution was first reported by Hazelgren in 1988, but in dentistry it was reported by Anderson. So this is the article by Anderson. Here you can see he compared two things, the hypochlorite and calcium hydroxide. Okay, this is table for hypochlorite and this is for the calcium hydroxide. He used, okay, first we'll talk about calcium hydroxide. Here you can see that after 7 to 9 days, there was complete, almost near to the complete dissolution of the pulp tissue. Whereas for hypochlorite, here you can see that it took 120 to 140 minutes to completely dissolve the tooth tissue. Here again, I'm telling you that if you want to use calcium hydroxide to be if you want calcium hydroxide to act as an antimicrobial agent and as a pulp dissolve you, as the pulp dissolution, if you want the pulp to be dissolved by calcium hydroxide, you need to use calcium hydroxide dressing for 7 to 10 days. Okay, so this is also one study which supports this fact. Now, the next is, after that, one thought was put forward that if you do pre-treatment with hypochlorite and after that if you put calcium hydroxide, is there any effect of hypochlorite on the tissue dissolution capacity of calcium hydroxide, right? So just focus on this chart. This is the 15-second sodium hypochlorite application. This is 30 and this is 60. So during initial period, it is effective, but if you see on an average, in the long duration, it is almost the same, right? So any pre-treatment with the sodium hypochlorite does not have any effect on the on the tissue dissolving capacity of calcium hydroxide. But again, there are few studies which say that calcium hydroxide is not effective in the pulp dissolution thing. Okay. Now we are done with the property. Now we'll discuss about the vehicle. Vehicle is very important if you're talking about the medicaments because it determines the velocity of ionic dissociation. Like at what rate ions will dissociate from your medicament, that will be determined by the vehicle. So it was categorized into three categories: the water soluble, viscous, and oil based. If you see water soluble, the examples have water, saline, and acidic solution, and most commonly used one are the sterile saline and sterile water and saline. And we know that aqueous based solution in the ionic dissociation is more in the aqueous based solution. So you have to replace the medicament more frequently and it requires more number of appointments. But if you see the viscous vehicle, in that we use glycerin, propylene glycol, and PEG. So in that it releases, the ionic dissociation is slow and it is for longer duration. So you require less number of appointment. But if you don't want to use viscous vehicle, then according to Behnen et al. In 2001, you can use thick mixture of calcium hydroxide with water. Okay, so it will also work significantly. It will have significantly improved antimicrobial property than a thin mix. Okay. And next is oil based. We know that oily vehicle have restricted applications as they're difficult to remove and will leave a residue on the canal, which is difficult, to remove, right? And calcium hydroxide based oil vehicle, the calcium hydroxide which has the oil vehicle, there are two examples, the Metapex and Vitapex. Both have similar composition. The only difference is the company. Okay, but it has the calcium hydroxide around 30%, iodoform around 40%, and the rest is the silicone oil. Now, if we talk about these vehicles, which is the most commonly used one? I'm talking about in general, okay, not about calcium hydroxide. The most commonly used one is the polyethylene glycol because it has, it has the low toxicity. It is highly soluble in the aqueous solution also, and it has its own substantial antimicrobial activity against this bacteria. So indirectly, it will potentiate the action of your intracanal medicament. Okay, so the most commonly used in vehicle in general is polyethylene glycol. Now, if you use, there are controversy regarding the type of vehicle to be used as an, I mean, to be mixed with calcium hydroxide to make it more effective. Like according to Estrella, if whatever vehicle you use, it does not actually potentiate the effect of calcium hydroxide. It has the almost significantly similar effect on the bacteria. And if you see the other part of the controversy, like according to Bannon et al., if you use less viscous preparation, these are the more effective in removal of bacteria than the more viscous, because there will be more dissociation of the ion in less viscous preparation. Okay. Now we'll talk about the placement of calcium hydroxide paste. How will you place it inside the canal? So there was one study in that they compared the different delivery method, like lentulospiral, normal file, the flexo file, hand file, then NITI reverse rotary, and they checked the placement of calcium hydroxide dressing into two sample, one with the master apical size 25, one with the 40. So if you compare the 25 among, I mean, the delivery system, it is not significant, there is not significant difference, right? And if you compare the 25 and 40, of course there was a significant difference, because now you have wider canals, so you will, I mean, it is easier for you to place calcium hydroxide in such condition, right? Then the next is, if you're gonna use lentulospiral, at what speed you should use. So according to this study, they compared three speed, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, and they concluded that with the increase in speed, that is the 15,000 is more effective in placing calcium hydroxide. But with such a speed, there are chances of extrusion. So the next study, that in that they compare the hand file in the counterclockwise action and the lentulospiral in clockwise action with the different speed, like 5,000, 10,000, and 20,000, and they found out that the normal hand file in counterclock motion and the lentulospiral at 5,000 speed can be considered safe. So both have similar results in terms of safety, I'm telling. Okay. Then we'll talk about the relation between dentine and calcium hydroxide. The first is the buffering effect of dentine, that is the effect of dentine on calcium hydroxide. I've presented last JC about the same, the buffering effect of dentine on certain acids and alkali. If you guys remember, anyway, I'll just say one sentence. I mean, the conclusion of that study, they concluded that dentine can buffer the organic acids such as lactic acid, which are produced by the bacteria. No, sorry, it cannot buffer organic acids such as lactic acid, whereas it can buffer the inorganic acids such as phosphoric acid, sulfuric acid, and all. And again, it can also buffer the highly alkaline solution. So calcium hydroxide falls into that category. When according to Portnier and Hapicillo, if you mix the, I mean, if you check the calcium hydroxide alone, it can kill the E. faecalis, but if you mix it with dentine, then there will be, I mean, it does not have any antibacterial effect on against E. faecalis. This is the study you can see, and even after adding the serum albumin also. So they are saying that inorganic and organic part, both part of dentine can buffer the hydroxyl ion which are present in the calcium hydroxide, and hydroxyl ions are the one which are responsible for the antimicrobial effect, right? And which are responsible for tissue dissolution effect also. So if your dentine, I mean, dentine will be there in tooth, where will it go? The main thing what I want to tell you guys is, if the calcium hydroxide, if you are using calcium hydroxide as an intracanal medicament, because of dentine, there will be less antimicrobial effect and less tissue dissolving capability of the calcium hydroxide because of its buffering effect. Okay. Next is effect of calcium hydroxide on dentine. This we've already discussed, that it can reduce the flexural strength and fracture resistance of the dentine. So if you use it for the longer period of time, say for example 6 months to 1 year, it can result in reduce the mechanical strength of the dentine. So this also we have discussed, that according to Sequeira, he gave a standard protocol of using calcium hydroxide up to 30 days, particularly for the infected mature tooth with apical periodontitis. Okay. Now we'll talk about the diffusion of hydroxyl ion through the dentine. Like what are the factors that affects the diffusion that affects the diffusion of hydroxyl ion? The first is the time duration. If you use calcium hydroxide for 1 month, there was a pH gradient if you go from inside the canal to the outside of the root. Okay, that is near the cementum. And if you use it for 4 months, calcium hydroxide, the hydroxyl ion takes few hours to diffuse into the inner root dentine. If you imagine the canal, okay, inner root dentine, and then it takes 7 days to reach to the outer root dentine. And according to this study, Novick et al, I'm telling, and to reach the calcium hydroxide at peak levels, it takes 2 to 3 weeks. This is the first factor, the time duration. And the second thing is the canal patency. If you use it in the cases of cervical root resorption, even if you just compare the same canal, but at different area like cervical and apical, we know that dentinal tubules diameter decreases when we go in the apical area. So cervical dentine has the largest dentinal diameter, and the apical area has the smallest dentinal tubule. So definitely in the cervical area, there will be more amount of diffusion of the hydroxyl ion. And one protocol was suggested by Safe et al in 2008, that if you use the irrigant, that is the EDTA, to remove smear layer, there will be more amount of diffusion of hydroxyl ion. But again, if you see the property of calcium hydroxide, the controversy comes. Before also, as I asked you the question, that should we use EDTA to expose the more collagen to the E. faecalis, to make it more favorable, to make it, to convert the environment into favorable condition for E. faecalis, or should we use, should we do it for the better diffusion of hydroxyl ion? Okay, so there is a controversy in the property. Now, the next is effect of calcium hydroxide on clinical outcome. There are two factors which must be taken into consideration before deciding upon the whether we should use single sitting or multiple sitting. Because if you're using calcium hydroxide as an intracanal medicament, that means you're doing multiple sitting, not single sitting, right? So the first is post-operative pain. If you compare the both things, there is no significant difference in the incidence of post-operative pain if you're doing single sitting and multiple sitting using calcium hydroxide dressing. So the only factor that should be taken into consideration is long-term outcome. But again, there are controversies. Like according to these two studies, they are saying that if you use calcium hydroxide dressing for just 1 week, there will be improved healing rates. Okay, and they suggested the use of the calcium hydroxide for 1 week. Whereas there are few studies which are saying that even if you use calcium hydroxide for 4 weeks, there is no significant differences in healing of periapical radiolucency between the teeth that were treated in one sitting and with the two sitting. Okay, so there is a still controversy concerning about the number of treatment appointments. Okay, now the next is chlorhexidine, the correlation between chlorhexidine and calcium hydroxide, chlorhexidine versus calcium hydroxide, and along with calcium hydroxide. So if you want to compare chlorhexidine with calcium hydroxide, you should compare the antimicrobial effect. Now here, if you see this study, the 2% chlorhexidine gel is more effective than the mixture of chlorhexidine and calcium hydroxide, and then the least effective is the calcium hydroxide alone. Now here, the most important part is just try to concentrate. When you mix the chlorhexidine and calcium hydroxide, okay, leave it. Now we know that chlorhexidine is a cationic form. And how does it kill the bacteria? It will bind to the anionic part of the cell wall, and that is how it kills the bacteria. Okay, so but when you mix the chlorhexidine and calcium hydroxide, normally chlorhexidine works between the pH range of 5.5 to 7. So by adding calcium hydroxide, you are increasing the alkalinity, right? So it will reach up to at least more than 10 pH. So this can actually cause the deprotonation of the chlorhexidine. And because of deprotonation, the charge, whatever the charge was there on the chlorhexidine, that was the cationic form, that changes. Okay, and because of that, the solubility of the chlorhexidine also decreases. And because of all this, the deprotonation and reduced solubility, there will be formation of certain precipitates. Okay, if you mix the calcium hydroxide with chlorhexidine. I don't know the name of precipitates. Actually, honestly, I didn't go through the literature much to find it out. I'll just try one more time. If I get to know, I'll tell you guys. That is the one thing. And if you have mixed the chlorhexidine and calcium hydroxide, it will form the precipitate. So that means it is difficult to remove from the canal. So to remove it from the canal, the 7% malic acid and 10% citric acid are more effective than the 17% EDTA and sodium hypochlorite alone. Okay. Now the next is sodium hypochlorite and calcium hydroxide. So if you compare the tissue dissolution capacity, it has, here you can see, sorry, not tissue dissolution capacity, the, what you say, the removal of the amount of debris. Sodium hypochlorite takes more than 30 seconds to remove the debris from the canal, and calcium hydroxide takes minimum of 7 days. Okay, that was the comparison. But if you combine the sodium hypochlorite and sodium and calcium hydroxide, the combination is more effective in removing the debris also, and in the pulp dissolution capacity also. But again, in the Anderson study, if you remember, in this session only, we have discussed about this, that sodium hypochlorite alone takes 120 to 140 minutes, right, to dissolve the pulp tissue. But calcium hydroxide can dissolve it within the 7 days, and it is not practically possible to irrigate the canal till 2 hours, right? So the intracanal medicament to dissolve the remaining pulp tissue is more effective. Now, coming to the removal of calcium hydroxide from the canal, we know that if the remnants are left behind into the canal, there will be compromised sealer adaptation and penetration. So there are certain factors that affects the removal of calcium hydroxide. First is the vehicle. All of us know that the aqueous form of calcium hydroxide can be easily removed, but oil-based are the difficult to remove. So if you talk about the type of irrigant which can be used to remove this oil-based calcium hydroxide, that is the Metapex, the 10% citric acid and 10% malic acid is more effective than 17% EDTA and 5% sodium hypochlorite alone. But again, there are no studies which stated that this type of irrigant and this type of technique can remove calcium hydroxide, the oil-based calcium hydroxide, completely. Okay, so according to this study, you can see that sonic, that is the endoactivator, was more effective as compared to ultrasonic and endovec. And like one more thing that tried here, you can see this is the chart. Okay, that in apical area also, this in the apical area also, the endoactivator was more effective in removal. And there is one study in that they tried different even file system also to remove the calcium hydroxide or the Metapex oil-based calcium hydroxide. But again, that study also stated that there is no technique or irrigant which can remove the calcium hydroxide, the Metapex, completely. But if you want to remove it more effectively, you should use 10% citric acid and 10% malic acid along with endoactivator. Okay. Now, when to replace calcium hydroxide? In certain conditions like open apex cases, you have to replace calcium hydroxide dressing, right? So if you're using calcium hydroxide saline dressing, it is advocated that the minimum time is 7 to 10 days, that we know. The maximum you can keep the calcium hydroxide dressing up to 30 days if you're using saline based. But if you're using oil based, you can use up to 3 months. After 3 months, you need to replace, because we know the calcium hydroxide, how does it work? It dissociates. So there will be dissociation of the ion after 30 days. So, there will be depletion of the ion. So for that, you need to replace it after 30 days if you're using saline based, and for oil based, it is 3 months. Now, the correlation between calcium hydroxide and carbon dioxide. If there is presence of carbon dioxide, now from where the calcium hydroxide comes into the canal? From the tissue fluid and from the metabolism of the bacteria. So because of the reaction between the calcium hydroxide and carbon dioxide, there will be formation of calcium carbonate, which will again block the dental tubules, even the accessory canals also, which will further prevent the prevent the ingression of the carbon dioxide into the canal. Okay. And second thing, it has the negative effect. How? Because of the reaction of calcium hydroxide and CO2, there will be decrease in pH. Okay. This is the study you can see here. That these are the different form of calcium hydroxide, and this is the pH in normal environment, and with the carbon dioxide there was a significant decrease in pH. However, this pH was pretty good, like 12.5 is a good digit. But again, clinical condition, it is difficult to reach even to the 13 to make it 12. Okay, so this is the in vitro condition. In vivo, it is entirely different condition, and that's it. That carbon dioxide can decrease the pH of calcium hydroxide, so it reduces the effectiveness. Then comes the toxicity. There are 2 animal study here, you can see, and that they implanted calcium hydroxide in the bone of the animals, and they found out that it was the least irritating material, and there was a formation of new bone within 12 weeks. And clinically also, if there is an extrusion of calcium hydroxide based medicament, it can, it will be resolved by our body cell mechanism. But the only negative effect is it can delay the healing procedure because of the constant irritation. Okay, I'll show you one case report. In this is the lower canine and premolar, and the patient presented with the history of trauma. Here you can see the periapical lesion. So they did the endo for premolar, and for canine they placed the calcium hydroxide dressing and they mixed the barium sulfate to make it radio opaque. Okay, and they placed the calcium hydroxide using lentillo spiral, and accidentally it was extruded. And after that, they completed the endodontic treatment, and this is the 36 months follow up. Here you can see that still there is a presence of calcium hydroxide. That is mainly because of the barium sulfate. Okay, calcium hydroxide might have resolved, but because of the presence of barium sulfate, it is still visible. But if you see the healing procedure, there is a drastic decrease in the size of periapical relucency, right? I'll show you one case. Actually, it is one of my cases. I don't have pre-operative radiograph. This is the initial cases of when I used Metapex for the first time. Sorry. So you can see after doing BMP, I put the Metapex inside the canal, and it was it was extruded. And I recall the patient after 1.5 months. So there you can see the decrease in size of the Metapex extruded material. And after 3 months, it was completely resolved. Okay. And then after that, I finished the root canal treatment. This is the master core radiograph, and this is the final radiograph. I don't have any follow-up radiograph. This is the case. In that you can see that there is the complete resorption of the Metapex after 3 months. Now we are done with the intracanal medicament. Now we'll discuss about the root canal sealer. So the clinical significance of root canal sealer, we know that it fills the irregularity in the clinical canal system. That is how it entopes the remaining bacteria. If we classify the sealer broadly, it is classified into 4 categories by Grossman. In that, the calcium hydroxide based sealer, the most commonly used one are the Sealapex and Apexit. I'll tell you few composition of the older calcium hydroxide based root canal sealer. See, this is the CRCS. Here you can see in the older calcium hydroxide based sealer, they use zinc oxide and eugenol also as a part of sealer. I don't know why. And then the next is sealer 26. Here they use the resin component. Here they didn't use zinc oxide. And in Endoflex FS, it is also calcium hydroxide based. In this also they use zinc oxide and eugenol. But if you see the newer materials, Sealapex and Apexit, they don't have any zinc oxide component, or sorry, it has zinc oxide, but in the lesser amount, and in the Apexit also. But if you see here, last time also I told you that if it is 2 paste system, in one paste there will be calcium hydroxide, in the other paste there will be salicylate. Okay, so that is how it sets, and that is how it works. The calcium hydroxide from this paste will act with the salicylate of the other paste. Okay, now we'll discuss about 5 property of sealer, and that's it. After that it's done. Okay, so just try to concentrate for a little bit longer. Now the leakage first, we'll talk about the first coronal leakage. This is the studies done by Sequeira. Here they compare the resin based and Sealapex. Here you can see that after 60 days, there were 80% of the samples of Sealapex which were completely contaminated by the saliva. And one more study in this, here also you can see this focus on this, that this is the calcium hydroxide based sealer. The micro leakage was more, the highest was in the Sealapex cases. Okay, so if you compare Sealapex with the resin based and bioceramic based sealer, it has poor leakage. It has more leakage, poor sealing ability. And the main important thing is the thickness of sealer. So if you use it for 0.5, 0.25 and 3 mm, okay, the thickness I'm talking about. So this is the study they've done, and they check the thickness. Here you can see that with the increase in thickness, there is a decrease in leakage. Okay, with decrease in thickness, there is increase in leakage. This happens because calcium hydroxide containing, this, the root canal sealer can form the crystals in presence of water. And because of that crystals, later on this crystal will cause, it expands in presence of water and can cause the more sealing afterward. And but again, if you see the longer duration, there will be dissolution of the calcium hydroxide based sealer, because that is how it works. It dissociates and it acts in the environment, and because of the dissociation there will be leakage, right? And if you compare it with the zinc oxide based sealer, it has good, it has good property. Zinc oxide based sealer has more leakage as compared to Sealapex. And resin base and all, it has less leakage than the Sealapex. Okay. Now the next is solubility. First is the solubility in tissue fluid. We know that it has the poor solubility, then the resin based and bioceramic based. If you see the solubility in solvent, we need this property to remove the material in cases of retreatment. Okay, so there are certain solvents, the chloroform, benzene, xylene, halothane, and eucalyptus oil. Here you can see that this is the remaining component of the sealer. Okay, so in Apexit you can see that it was more soluble than resin based sealer in chloroform particularly. And in one study they compare this bar you see. In one study they compare the chloroform and eucalyptus. The black one is the chloroform, this is the eucalyptus. So you can see that after placing the chloroform for 10 minutes, it dissolves the almost 40% of the seal apex, whereas eucalyptus oil did not could not dissolve the seal apex. Okay, and if you compare the other three, andosol, xylene, and arcisol, and andosol can dissolve the seal apex more effectively than xylene and arcisol. Then the biocompatibility. There are 5 approaches to assess the biocompatibility of any material. First is the cytotoxicity. In cytotoxicity, this is the only calcium hydroxide base sealer. Okay, all 4. So if you see, this is the gradient of cytotoxicity. But there are few studies. I mean, based on different studies, there is controversy between the Apexit and seal apex, the cytotoxicity of Apexit and seal apex. But so many studies are supporting that seal apex is more cytotoxic than the Apexit. Now the genotoxicity, if you see, the resin based sealer is more genotoxic than the calcium hydroxide based sealer. Then they did the subcutaneous implant also. In that also you can see that the seal apex has the better biocompatibility than zinc oxide eugenol sealer. Okay, so if you compare the zinc oxide based calcium hydroxide based and resin based, seal apex is more biocompatible than zinc oxide based. And there is a controversy between resin based and calcium hydroxide based. I mean, calcium hydroxide based are better because resin based can cause the DNA damage also. Now the next is the usage study. And that also they try to overfill the root canal with the calcium hydroxide based sealer and the other sealer. So you can see that the endomethacin was the more destructive as compared to the Apexit. The resin base was also more destructive. Okay, then the antimicrobial property. Here you can see that seal apex has the antimicrobial property against few bacteria. But if you compare seal apex with the zinc oxide base, the zinc oxide base has the more antimicrobial activity than seal apex. Okay, and again the main important factor is the time. If you compare seal apex, sealer 26 and Apexit, all these 3 are the calcium hydroxide based only. Then seal apex takes around 30 days to act as an antimicrobial agent, whereas sealer 26 releases higher amount of hydroxyl ion during the initial period. After that it reduced. Then the toxicity, the same thing whatever we discussed in the intracanal medicament part, that it will get resolved by the tissue fluid, but the only thing that it keeps irritating that area, so the healing will delay. So in this study you can see, this is the study, okay, case report, not case report. The extrusion of the calcium hydroxide, after 9 months it completely dissolved. And then in that they compare the post-operative pain also. They give the visual analog scale and they give the digit 1 to 100. So here you can see that in seal apex there was almost, after 24 to 48 hours, the less pain as compared to the resin base. This is the AH plus first is, then third is the calcium hydroxide based. And if you see the healing part also, it has almost similar healing as the AH plus resin based even after extrusion. Okay, so it does not affect the healing part. The only thing is that it can delay the procedure that any sealer can do. Okay, then to conclude, to summarize, calcium hydroxide as an intracanal medicament is effective in certain conditions in spite of having certain disadvantages. And if you see the calcium hydroxide based sealer, although it is well tolerated by the periapical tissue, but because of its high solubility, calcium hydroxide based sealer does not fulfill the main criteria of the ideal sealer, that is the sealing ability. Okay, these are my references, and thank you for your patience hearing.